Hello, Star Trek fans. Welcome to Rebinge It. This is the Rebinge Star Trek Voyager podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we are rebinging Star Trek Voyager from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on our Season 2 wrap-up, where we are going to talk about the highs and lows of Season 2.
We were just going to skip like we did in Season 1, but we've had emails going, where's the wrap-up? Why didn't you do a wrap-up? So this truly is back by popular request.
Yeah, and I'm surprised because usually we get fewer listeners on the wrap-up, but it's like, okay, if you want it, here it comes. So we decided, all right, we'll throw it together. Now, normally on Deep Space Nine, we would keep categories as we go, but we didn't do that because we weren't really expecting to have to put the categories together at the end. So we're going to wing it a little bit.
Yeah. We do have some categories, though.
All right, since we skipped Season 1 wrap-up, maybe we'll start there and talk a little bit about Season 1.
Yes.
So do you want to tell me what your worst episodes of Season 1 are or your best? Where would you like to start?
Let's start on the positives.
Okay.
And give you my top 3, because it's a shortened series, so...
Okay.
Starting off at number 3, Jetrel. It was kind of aiming for duet, but didn't really quite make it. It was pretty good in its own right, and it also, I think, was arguably the first episode where Ethan Phillips was given some good material and got a chance to really act.
Yeah, that's probably the first time, really, with Neelix where you actually have a little bit of... Or you should have some empathy for him and his situation.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can see that. Okay. That was a good episode.
I think it's the first time Neelix wasn't really almost a joke.
Yeah.
Number 2, Prime Factors. There was something, I think...
Oily G.
Yeah, there was something about this race of technologically advanced, vacuous dilettantes that I just really liked. And we also got to see how kind of reckless Seska could be.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, those were early hints of trouble with Seska.
Right. Tuvok as well, making the decisions the captain couldn't. It was quite impressive. My number 1, and this might make you laugh, Faces.
Oh, that is a surprise.
Because the makeup is really good. I think the Vidians are great. They're so much more menacing than the Kazon. The Kazon seem like kind of irritating bullies. You know, we talked about it. Low-cost Klingons, where the Vidians are actually really kind of menacing and their behavior is awful because they can morally justify it. I'm not killing you because I'm a bad guy. I'm doing it because I need your organs, because people will live. Think of the good that you're doing. They're a far better villain than the Kazon. I think as well because they're utterly ruthless.
Yeah. No, I agree. They're a much scarier villain than the Kazon. The Kazon are almost a joke.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do agree with that. So when you look at the data, our thumbs up, thumbs down numbers for Season 1, and I will talk a little bit more about the data later, but when you look at it, we pretty much gave everything in Season 1 a thumbs up. I mean, we had a lot of positives of the 16 episodes. Was it 16 or 15 episodes?
Depends how you count episode 1.
Oh, so I didn't even trying to come up with the bottom list. I'm like, well, there's really only one terrible episode that I clocked in Season 1. But the reason I bring it up is my top 3 episodes don't match yours in any way. I have 3 completely different episodes. In fact, I didn't even have Prime Factors in my top 10. But it's because they're all pretty much good episodes. So probably on a different day, I would have ranked them a little bit differently.
Yeah.
Well, my top 5, I put at number 5, Caretaker, the pilot.
Oh,
I thought it set us up pretty well, and I thought it set the characters up pretty well. And then at number 4, I put State of Flux. That was the episode where we learn Seska is a hidden Cardassian and the bad guy. I thought that was pretty good overall.
That was a good one, yeah.
Yeah. Number 3, I put Cathexis. That was the one where Tuvok got taken over by an unseen energy entity, and Chakotay was brain dead and somehow still flying around the station. There's still some goofy things that happen in that episode where the beings are able to sort of go through the shields, or we pretend like we don't have shields and then they can't get through the shields. So there's kind of some funny stuff at the end, but I think overall it's a very good, very entertaining episode.
Yeah, it's like they can get out through the shields, but they can't get in through the shields.
Yeah. Number 2, I put Parallax. That was the second episode of season 1, and there were just some things in it I really liked where, when they realized that the ship they were trying to save was actually themselves, and just the little bit of time displacement, and I liked the steps forward with the relationship with B'Elanna and the captain. It's one of the things I really vividly remembered, of this 20-some-year-old show.
Yeah. Even though that episode has a lot of similarities to a TNG plot.
Maybe that's why I liked it.
Oh, and for the life of me, I can't remember the episode.
The one where they find Picard from the future?
Yes, in the shuttle.
Time squared.
Thank you. I know I can rely on you for the TNG names.
Not always. I usually have to look them up, but every now and then I can pull one out. But, I mean, maybe that's why I liked it. That's the kind of episode I quite like, where it's pretty self-contained with just the crew. It doesn't need any other aliens. And, they do a little bit of time shenanigans, but it's nothing too crazy with time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe that's why I liked it.
It was also good because Janeway was bonding with B'Elanna and seeing why she should potentially be the engineering chief.
I mean, if we think about the female characters and the things I used to complain about in season 1 of Deep Space Nine, where anytime the women characters got together, they were talking about boys, which was just infuriating. And then to get to this show and have the 2 women characters just talking about how to solve the problem and doing their jobs, it's like, that's a pretty big and important step and something that women notice.
Okay.
Well, then I thought the best episode of season 1 is Eye of the Needle, the one where they find the Romulan who's actually displaced in time again, another time problem. I actually thought the ending of that was so surprising and different, and that was a pretty good one. Although it does sort of kick off the Gilligan's Island thing a bit, but it's a good episode.
Well, I remember you were rather annoyed by Tuvok's behavior at the end.
Oh, I was very annoyed by it. I thought he should have been completely told off by what he did.
Yeah. I would agree. That actually is a very good episode.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And then I think, talking about the episodes that weren't so good, I believe there's only one episode that we both gave a thumbs down to, and that was The Cloud. That was a very early episode, but it was god-awful, as I recall. And, a pretty crappy episode of season 1, so...
It was thoroughly meh.
Yeah. And I didn't really like the season finale. I didn't think it felt like a season finale, which, as of course, it turned out a whole bunch of people emailed us to say, oh no, these episodes got all messed up between season 1 and season 2 of Voyager. But I didn't think that was a very good one. Then there was the one with Tom and the memory placement, so that everybody thought he was a murderer. I mean, that was one of those terrible episodes of Star Trek that I don't normally like. But really, otherwise, we gave all thumbs up. So I don't know if you had anything else as a bottom episode.
Well, I think Ex Post Facto was probably one of the weakest ones. It did feel like Robert Duncan McNeil was kind of fighting the material to try and get something good out of it. It felt very stilted. Well,
he's always sort of fighting, I think, as an actor against this weird Playboy image they're trying to give him because they don't really write it correctly. Yeah. But no, that's a weak episode, no doubt.
Yeah. But you're right about Eye of the Needle. That was a superb episode. It would probably be number 4 on my list if we were doing to 5. And also, I like the way it kind of played into the paranoia of the Romulans.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Everything is a trick. You're trying to manipulate me.
Well, do you have any general impressions or what stood out in season 1 besides these episodes that we just talked about?
Yeah. Well, one thing I want to bring up is, we talked about how, and people mailed us about this, about how they messed up how they wanted to do the season finale. So episodes that should have been the end were actually used in the next season and so on. I mean, that stuff is great, but you have to look at it in the show at the time as you're watching it. And this comes down to the argument of, I don't want to read a bucket of canon to understand what's going on in a show. And I think the way I certainly look at these things is they have to stand as TV shows on their own.
Right.
I don't want to have to read and learn things about it to actually understand what's going on in an episode. And they have to live or die as they stand on television, as that's what they were put out as. All those comments are valid. I think you still have to look at it and go, it was just kind of a damp squib end of season. If you compare it with TNG and DS9 as end of season episodes.
Yeah, you and I both agree that we don't think you should have to read the companion novel of something or companion graphic novel in order to know what's going on. It's got to stand on its own. Otherwise, it needs to be a part of it, right? You have to put it into the story somehow. Yeah. No, I agree.
I will absolutely agree that the season started out with 2 really pretty decent episodes with The Caretaker.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was a solid Trek episode. In my opinion, it was stronger than the premiere of TNG.
Yeah, the premiere of TNG Encounter at Farpoint has some very low moments.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little goofy and sort of quirky. And I think, I can't remember, but I imagine all of us watching it were like, is this Star Trek? You know, it feels a lot more like TOS maybe than it intended or than it should.
Interesting. By this point, Star Trek, and I'll include DS9 on this, Star Trek had 7 seasons to bring things you've learned into the next show that you do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe that's why the opening of DS9 and Voyager were so good.
Yeah. For me, I would say my standout, like, goosebump moment happened in Parallax. There was, and I think I talked about it in the podcast, because there was that moment when they figure out that the other ship is also Voyager, and it really just gave me goosebumps. And I really liked that. I was like, oh yeah, this is the Star Trek that I want. This is what I've been waiting for, right? Is to get back to that feeling.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, the thing that stood up maybe negatively is this Gilligan's Island thing. And we talked about it a lot at the time. And then we joked about it a little bit, you know, in our rebinge of it. But at the time when it came out, we kept saying they can't just every week be talking about how they almost get back.
Yeah.
It's just not going to work. And at the same time, when they don't talk about getting back and they just pretend like everything's fine, it's a different kind of silly. You're just like, well, there should be some negativity of this, right? We should be really emotionally impacted. We should be traumatized.
Right.
Someone should be crying in the corner because maybe they just had a baby and the baby's not with them. They left the baby behind. Who knows, right? So many different things, but we just sort of pretended like it never happened. And so that balance, I don't think they do it particularly well, but they're forced to by the time we get to season 2. It's like you can't do that stuff anymore. You can't keep saying every week we almost got home.
Oh man, we were so close to getting home that time. I remember back in the day, that was something that really worried us.
Mm-hmm.
There were some other rocky things in here. I mean, we talked about it in the early episodes. Neelix was not a very well introduced character.
Oh no, terrible.
Was almost a joke.
Yeah.
They played a lot of tropes with him of the jealous boyfriend that more came off as just creepy.
Yeah, because of the age thing. Yeah. I mean, the age difference, but also the thing with Kes only really being a child. And I agree. That was a big misstep. And so was the whole thing with Chakotay and their, Native American so-called Native American consultant that they hired, who turned out to be a fraud. That didn't help. That just really undermines every single thing that they try to do. It becomes sort of gross to watch. So those are a couple of big missteps, I would say.
Well, it kind of felt like they lifted the portrayal of a Native American from a 50s cowboy movie.
Well, that's essentially what happened, right? Because that guy didn't know any more than anybody else. So he was playing on the stereotypes. Yeah, it's kind of sad.
It's what employing a known charlatan gets for you.
Do you have a view on maybe a guest star who was particularly good?
I don't feel there was anybody for me that really stood out.
Maybe the guy who played Jetrel. I mean, he was quite good. He was the one who was also Odo's dad.
Yeah.
James Sloyan. The Romulan in Eye of the Needle was also very good.
I feel Voyager has a lot of competent guest stars. I think that's the kind of the difference. You have people who are good at their roles, but maybe those roles aren't necessarily the ones that stick with me. Well,
it's quite different on Deep Space Nine, because as a space station, they're getting all kinds of different quirky characters in and out. And that's not going to be true of Voyager. It's only going to happen when they actually go to a planet or run into some other aliens. But when they're just flying along, we can have a bunch of stories without any guest stars.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Well, then what about just for the normal cast? Who would you say gets the Louise Fletcher Award for acting in season 1?
Well, it's a tough one because it's between Tuvok and Janeway. And I think it has to go to Janeway, in my opinion, because Tuvok isn't developed enough. But I feel Kate Mulgrew got the character day one. I think the character develops over time. But I think the essence of who Janeway is absolutely established in season 1.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I give it to Kate Mulgrew. She had to put up with so much off-screen as well, just in dealing with Janeway's hair, for example.
Yeah.
And whether or not Janeway was too masculine or not masculine enough or whatever. I think all that nonsense she had to really put up with. But she embodied Janeway immediately. And I don't even think you could say that about Patrick Stewart and Picard, especially when you watch Encounter at Farpoint, because he's kind of a jerk. And, he evolves into a different character.
Right.
Once they sort of establish that really he's not good with people. You know what I mean? He doesn't quite know how to adapt to his crew and how to get to know them better. And that's a really important part of the story arc. But Kate Mulgrew stepped in and she was Janeway from day one, which I thought was pretty good. Yeah.
Well, I think she made a great choice, and this is my personal opinion, of going back to Kirk as a captain and looking at the kind of captain he was.
Yeah, a little bit. Mm-hmm.
And the way she plays it, I think, is a solid, no fear, the essence of a Star Trek captain. You call it reckless at times. It is.
Yeah.
The fact she got it so quickly is quite impressive.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll add is I didn't think Harry was terribly well used until this rewatch and went, Harry had some great episodes.
Yeah, in season 1 and maybe the first half of season 2, he does kind of disappear into the woodwork in the second half.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, they just keep killing him off. Like we just released that episode the other day that they killed him again.
Yeah, Harry died.
But yeah, he's a bigger part of season 1 than I remember as well.
Right.
Well, looking at the numbers before we move on to season 2, we were pretty positive in our ratings in season 1, even though, yes, it is a shorter season. But I gave 80% of the episodes a thumbs up. You gave 87% a thumbs up. And then, but only 7% down for me and 7% down for you. And that's because we only said down to one episode, which was The Cloud. We just gave a couple of neutrals, right?
Right.
And if we compare that to season 1 of Deep Space Nine, which was just a couple of more episodes, I think it was 16 episodes for Voyager, but it was 19 for Deep Space Nine. And again, it depends on how you count the pilot.
Yeah.
I gave only something like 58%, I think, thumbs up for Deep Space Nine, but you gave 79%. But still, you gave Voyager more thumbs up in season 1. So I think if we look at it just sort of objectively by the numbers, we both viewed season 1 of Voyager as better than season 1 of Deep Space Nine.
That's an interesting statistic.
Yeah, but it's going to look quite different when we get to season 2. I will just warn you, but I'll share that in a few minutes.
Okay.
So let's move on to season 2.
Yes. Do we want to start negatively or positively?
Either one.
Let's stay on the positive. And you should start.
Okay, I have top 10, but you just want top 5? Is that what we decided?
Yes.
Okay. So number 5 on my list is The Thaw. That is the clown episode with Michael McKean. That's a very good episode. Had just a fantastic ending.
Totally agreed.
Very entertaining.
Oh, that ending was superb. I love it.
Yeah. Number 4, I put Meld, which I'm sure is high on your list.
Oh, how could you guess?
I think that's one of those episodes you talk about all the time.
Yes.
Number 3, I put Prototype. That was the robot in space.
Yep.
I did quite like that. I didn't like the thing about B'Elanna feeling like a mother. I thought that was dumb.
Yeah.
But overall, I did quite like that episode.
We talked about that. It was kind of silly with B'Elanna as the mother. But because I think a much better way of viewing her was someone getting caught up in the technology and the fun of solving a problem, rather than looking at the big picture and going, should I be doing this?
Well, especially when you get to the number 2 on my list, which is Dreadnought. Because that, I think, actually, we talked about it in the episode, but it should have aired before Prototype. Then I think it would have made a little bit more sense, her sort of obsession with that robot. Dreadnought, I thought, was a absolutely awesome episode. I did find it quite emotional at the end because, again, Jane was ready to blow up the ship and B'Elanna's ready to die to save it. And, it was really, really good Star Trek heroic stuff, that when you watch Trek, you really love, of course.
Yeah.
So that was my number 2.
Yeah, and every other Star Trek ship, you need multiple people to give the command code and to authorize the computer. Whereas with Voyager, Janeway is like, computer, blow up the ship again.
Well, clearly it's because it can be trusted in the hands of a woman. So, although she's tried to do it a bunch of times, so maybe not.
Hey, like I said, Janeway was on the fast track to be the next captain of the Enterprise.
Oh, I know. Every time you say that, it's like a dagger to my heart. And my number 1 episode of season 2 is Twisted.
Really?
I really enjoyed that episode. It's one of the few that I remember. I remember what happened. I didn't remember exactly how it ended, but I, at least remembered in general sort of what happened. And it had a real impact on me. So yeah, I like that one.
I think the thing about Twisted is It has a real Kobayashi Maru feel to it.
A little bit, yeah.
At that end, when they're all facing what could be their deaths.
I know.
Great Trek.
And they do that thing that reminded me of that moment in Prodigy when they took the leap of faith together and, sort of jumped out of the protostar in that handmade shuttle that they had. And they all held hands.
Quickly replicated shuttle, yes.
Oh, gosh. Yeah,
that was really
maybe my favorite moment of Prodigy. What about you?
Well, it is so tough because there are so many honorable mention episodes. Should we talk about the honorable mentions after this?
Okay, sure.
So the 5 spot is tough because Resistance was really close to making it to number 5. But I have to go with Persistence of Vision because I feel this is really close to actually being a genuine Star Trek horror episode. Excellent special makeup effects with an aspect of body horror on there. A great resolution at the end. There's so many questions about how is this guy doing it?
Yeah.
In some ways, it's exactly how to end an episode like this. You don't need to wrap anything up. Leave loose ends.
Oh, yeah.
You keep us thinking, what was going on? How is he doing this? What was the purpose? I think it works very well. I really enjoyed it, and it felt like a horror episode to me.
Oh, yeah. I could have just as easily put that in my top 5. Yeah.
Yeah. Next one, Innocence.
Really? With the kids?
Yes. Because in many ways, I feel this is a great Star Trek story. There's a failure of communication. There's a rescue mission. There's a Starfleet officer doing what they believe is their ethical duty. And a captain willing to back up that officer at any cost to protect what they believe are the innocent and the powerless. In this case, the child. So I think it embodies a lot of what Starfleet and the Federation are supposed to be. Also, Tim Russ is just great as the emotionless Vulcan.
Oh, Tim Russ is very good in that. I was just checking. We had an email from one of our longtime listeners, Rick, about this episode. I don't remember if you and I talked about this, but he said that this was the Mork from Ork episode.
Oh, that's
when
right.
They say the Morak was coming, he thought of Mork. And also because I guess Mork aged backwards, which is something that I had completely forgotten. So that was funny.
Number 3 on the list. And this is where we cross. Prototype.
Oh, yeah.
This is such a great tech episode. And like I said, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should be.
Right.
Number 2. And we cross again. Dreadnought.
Yeah, good.
Another fantastic tech episode, which I just love as a software developer. It's the ultimate in, oh, shoot, did you see what the program ended up doing?
I liked it every time it was like, hello, Belana.
Plus, Janeway is absolutely the hardcore captain.
Oh, she's so good. And I imagined at the end they had some new friends. They all went to the planet and had a party after they got all the escape pods back together.
I think I said at the time, nobody mentioned that B'Elanna was the one who programmed it.
Oh, man. Well, now, once they saved them, it's probably okay.
And you can probably guess what number 1 is.
No, tell me.
Meld.
Oh, I forgot you hadn't mentioned Meld yet. Yeah, obviously. That's your favorite, yeah.
It's such a great story. I think it's also helped by the fact that you had 2 fantastic actors being able to play off each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I love how there's that point in the episode where they appear to end up playing each other's characters.
Oh, yeah.
It's good Trek. It's a great story. As you always say, good Star Trek stories are told in a small space. And this is a great example of we don't have a lot of outside characters and it's mostly focused on these 2.
We don't need sets. We don't need special effects. It's just these 2 characters. And it's a very Trekky thing to do.
And I think this was, of all the episodes, this was the one I think I probably watched the most in rewatches and the one I could basically come back to and had done that episode without rewatching.
Well, and something that you frequently say is that your favorite episodes of Star Trek are in Voyager.
Yes.
And I assume that Meld is one of those. Is it the top one, or are there still even better ones to come?
Oh, there are better ones to come. It is one of my top ones. It's probably in the top 10 of favorite all-time Trek episodes.
Well, that's good. It would be sad if we'd peaked already, just in season 2. Well, do you have some other honorable mentions you'd like to mention?
Oh, honorable mentions.
Mm-hmm.
Non Sequitur.
Oh, yeah, that's on my list.
What a great time travel episode. Cosmo, loved them.
I loved how that one ended, too. Yeah, it was good.
Twisted, There's that almost a Kobayashi Maru feel to
Oh,
it.
yeah. I love Twisted.
Deadlock.
Deadlock was the one where Voyager split into two.
Which, despite flaws, I'd still kind of enjoyed the twist in it. I thought they did a good job there.
Deadlock makes me mad because I think it's a great episode until it isn't. When they hand that baby over and just pretend like everything's fine, it just all went out the window to me.
Yeah, you could have tweaked that episode and made it amazing.
Yeah, everything apart from the baby, I think is really, really good. Yeah.
Cold Fire, that was pretty decent as well.
Oh, that's not even in my list of honorable mentions. It's pretty good, though. Yeah.
Yeah. It showed the potential for Jennifer Lean's character that they never, I don't think they ever really recaptured.
Yeah.
And of course, Resistance, which that's getting up there for duet.
Yeah, I had Resistance and Alliances in my honorable mention. I think both really good episodes for different reasons. But Joel Grey in Resistance was just so good. There's some really good acting.
Yep.
And that was, again, another example of a pretty complicated story they were telling, but, really not in very many sets and with not very many effects at all.
Yeah.
So I also had Projections on my list. In fact, I think that was the number 6 on my list after my top 5.
Yeah.
That's the one where the doctor gets sort of stuck in that hologram.
Oh, yeah.
And isn't sure if he's real or not real. And there are a lot of things in that episode I like. There's a lot of silly stuff in it too, but I think it's a really good episode. And I always like those ones where they just about convince you that maybe what they're telling you is real.
Right. Yeah.
And then, oh no, never mind, it's not. So that was another good one.
Right. And on my final honorable mentions, I have the Thor because that was just a good, solid episode. And it is funny because, as you pointed out in the episode, Janeway is very reckless at times.
Yeah. And this one it's almost the opposite to me of Deadlock because the way it ended really turned it around for me as like one of the greatest episodes because I just loved at the end the way Janeway, or it's a hologram of Janeway, when the clown says, "I'm afraid," and she says, "I know." It's just too good. And then it ends with him saying, Drat, when he realizes he's lost. Yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah.
Absolutely agreed.
All right, let's talk about the bottom 5 then.
Okay.
Do you want to go first?
Yes.
So go from least worst to most worst.
Least worst. Threshold.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yes, it is terrible.
Yeah.
But it is also completely unintentionally hilarious. It's funny as hell.
We did laugh, yeah.
I don't think you can honestly watch this episode without laughing out loud at times. It is so ridiculous.
Each time I watch it, the first part of it, I think, this episode is not bad. What happened? And then I remember, and it's just like, oh no, this episode is very bad.
Editing that episode, because it was one with Atiba from Teebs and Kid Phoenix, how much laughing I had to edit out of that episode.
Oh, I know. We laughed so much.
Otherwise, we would have put out a 90-plus minute episode with entire blocks of us just laughing and trying to say something.
I liked how we all had a moment where the episode just turned to garbage, and it was a different moment for each of us. And I was the most tolerant. Mine was the latest into the episode when I just thought, we cannot recover from this. This episode is too terrible.
Yeah.
And I think people frequently, when they talk to us, they think I'm the harsher one, but not in that episode. I was actually like, this episode is not that bad. And then the tongue falls out, and then it's like, no, we can't recover.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's on my bottom 5 list,
but not your worst. I like it. All right.
Yeah. Next one, number 4, Tuvix. Because there's zero stakes. I know somebody who absolutely loves this episode, and it's kind of funny because I just feel this guy never had a claim to life in the first place.
Yeah, that's funny. I wouldn't put that in my bottom 5, but not a classic, even though it introduced something into Star Trek lore that no one will forget and, comes up a lot.
Right. Next one, which would be number 3, Elogium. My note on this just says, really? It's just creepy when you look at it.
That's the one where Kes all of a sudden goes into full I want to have a baby mode.
Yes.
And the sweating, that was the early sweating episodes.
Yeah.
No, that is not a great episode. No.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Number 2, Tattoo. Racially insensitive much?
I'm surprised there's something worse than Tattoo.
Well, my number one, Basics.
Oh, the season finale. Mm-hmm.
It just fails on so many levels, and
yeah, it's bad.
I keep on coming back to, did everybody get dumber while I was away? It's funny because the first part, it's a great cliffhanger, but to get there, you just threw everything out the window.
Yeah. It's obvious that we had a cliffhanger in mind, and we just worked everything to make that cliffhanger happen.
Yeah.
And the episode suffered because of it.
Right.
Well, my bottom 5 is pretty similar.
Oh, really?
I do have it number 5, Basics Part 1, because I agree for all the things we just talked about. It's a terrible episode. Yeah. And it's, again, an example of something that makes me so mad. That should have been a good episode, and it just isn't.
There was ways of doing it without being so horribly contrived.
Yeah. At number 4, I had a tie of Elogium and Parturition with the stupid puppet Muppet baby dinosaur.
Oh, I thought that thing was awesome.
Yeah, but also we had to put up with the Neelix nonsense, remember? And that was like the end of it.
Yes.
But still, that is annoying.
That was when they finally drew a line under that bad soap opera Neelix storyline.
Yeah, so I cheated a little there and combined 2, but my number 3 is Life Signs. I actually think Life Signs, where the doctor gets the phage girlfriend, is so dumb.
Yeah.
And I don't deny that I just have a problem with episodes like that, because I just think it's stupid when you try to convince me that somebody falls in love in 46 minutes, because I just think that's silly. But that one is terrible. We talk about what the Vidians have done.
Yeah.
And we just beam that person right on board, and we don't even discuss whether or not it's the right thing to do. And it's just really disappointing, I think. And then even the fact that they kind of made it look like B'Elanna decided to help her because she looked nice. Do you know what I mean? It was just like there was no real reason for B'Elanna to just all of a sudden flip and decide to help her. It made more sense when she was annoyed that the doctor was trying to force her into it. But then she just went, oh, haha, I'll do it. It's like, what?
Yeah.
It's just a weak episode.
And was that the episode where the science advisor was clearly on vacation that week when they were writing it?
Probably, yeah, maybe. And then my number 2 is Threshold, for all the reasons we talked about.
Yeah.
It is a bad episode, but it's infamous, and we did laugh a lot about it, but it's still pretty terrible. And then my number 1 is Tattoo. And a lot of it is just simply because of the mistake we made with, the fraudster as the consultant. But the implication that there was this white alien telling the indigenous people of whatever region they were indigenous to on Earth that this was the way. And it's just like, oh, come on now. What we didn't even think about how terrible that looked. And
it was the 90s.
That was bad.
Yeah. There were a lot of problems with 90s television.
Oh, yeah. And especially for women, but turns out also for Native Americans, probably anybody of color, to be clear. And we did talk about how there were some kind of good performances in the flashbacks, like the actor that played Chakotay as a kid and his father, right? They were pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, I thought he played a teenager perfectly.
It just didn't make up for how terrible that episode is.
Yeah. And his dad's Indiana Jones obsession.
With the hat.
Yeah.
Well, what about, do you have maybe a best or worst moment from the whole season of season 2?
Well, you start off with that.
So the first thing I would say is that the best line of the entire season was when Janeway asked how much brain damage it would cause to unhook Harry from the thaw.
Oh yeah, that was great.
Laughed out loud. It was so funny. The doctor's like, we can't just unplug them because they'll get brain damage. How much brain damage? Because she's so sick of the whole thing.
Yeah.
That was my favorite.
Well, that was also, I think at that moment, there was a point in it where you just see Janeway, the character, just reach okay, I am done with this.
Yeah, I'm going to solve this problem now.
Yeah.
And to me, the best moment of this season also happened in that episode, just at the end. I thought the end was so great.
Yeah.
When the clown just said, drat, and it went black. It was brilliant. They didn't have to over-explain it. And it all ended sort of with the captain giving a speech, right? And then boom, over. I thought that was the best moment of the whole season. And anybody who's listened to this podcast will already know what I'm going to say the worst moment is, and that was the tongue. That is the opposite of what I want to be seeing in Star Trek. When Tom's tongue fell out, it almost is like, when I rewatch it now, it's almost like a joke. It's so terrible. We're not watching a horror movie. What is happening? And not even a serious horror movie at that. That whole episode is so ridiculous. But when his tongue falls out, we hit rock bottom.
I think if you ask me about lines, I think I would probably actually go to Innocence. I think what I love about Tim Russ's portrayal of a Vulcan is the way he plays his character very emotionless, but you can see the times where the Vulcans are clearly trying to hide their emotions as a race and pretend that it doesn't mean anything to them. And in Innocence, when he asks him about that, oh, you don't love your children? And he's like, they complete me. It's important that they're part of my life, sort of thing. And it's like, oh yeah, you love your kids, you just can't admit to it or say it. So I do like, that dialogue that happened in there. And when it comes to the worst moments of season 2, it's got to be Chakotay in Basics discussion with the father with some absolute unbelievable false equivalency. And I won't even go into the details.
Oh, that was a low point.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
It's hard to disagree. I almost put that out of my mind.
Sorry.
It was infuriating,
But if you want a silly one, I would go with Janeway in the Frontier Woman dress in Resolutions, where she's going to do science.
Where she comes out with her handbag and is going to the mall in the 90s.
Yes. Because, going on a hike through the woods, you're going to wear your Frontier Woman long dress.
Yeah, I agree. That was silly. I would say one of the things about that episode is, when you warned me this was not going to be a great episode, and then I saw the synopsis and I was really prepared for that to be the low point of the season. But I was pleasantly surprised that episode was actually pretty good. And I think it would have been better if they dragged it out. A little bit longer. Yeah. And the stuff with the monkey was dumb. But I do think in the long run, that was actually a pretty good episode.
Yeah.
Well, then what about, let's do two things. Let's do acting by a guest star, and then we'll do the Louise Fletcher Award for the main crew. So I have Michael McKean as the clown. Was a pretty good standout guest actor. How about you? Would you name anybody else?
Well, there can only be one for me. Brad Dourif.
Yeah, Brad Dourif is very good in Meld. And then even in Basics, where he reappears, he's quite good. Yeah. In fact, that's probably the one good thing about it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed his appearance, and it's one of those characters that just sticks with me.
Yeah.
Lon Sutter. I've mentioned him more than once when we talk about Voyager.
Yeah, totally, you have. I think also Joel Grey could get an honorable mention as a good guest star. Yeah, in season 2. We used to talk in Deep Space Nine about wigs and hair, and I didn't really take note of that too much here. We talked a lot about Janeway's hair in season 1, but it's really calmed down in season 2 as they just kind of stopped, trying a different hairstyle from week to week or making the bun bigger from week to week.
Right.
I did think there were a couple of times where Kess's wig was a little questionable, but nothing really of note.
Kess's whole outfits, I think.
Some of her outfits are questionable.
The vibe with Kess is so weird.
Yeah.
Sometimes they seem to be trying to make her like some kind of pixie or elf.
Yeah.
And the wig, I don't know what they were quite aiming at.
Right. Oh, I forgot about the Louise Fletcher Award for season 2 for the main cast. Who would you give it to in season 2 if we gave it to Kate Mulgrew in season 1?
Tim Russ.
Yeah, I agree. He was the person I put as well. I think he had a couple of episodes that he really had to act and meld, maybe the biggest one, because he actually has that scene where, well, multiple scenes where he sort of loses control, but there's the one scene that he has with Kate Mulgrew where he's lost all of his inhibitions, it's very good. I do think Jennifer Lean was pretty good as well, maybe as an honorable mention there.
I think the other thing that comes out with season 2, when it comes to the acting, is there's the struggle, I think, with Tom, of the writing of Tom and where he's sort of heading. And I know it settles down, but season 2, I feel, is, if anything, it's in some ways the weakest character because they're not quite sure how to write him or what to do with him.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's nothing to do with the acting, because we know what happens later on. It's just when you're looking at it like this, you're like, wow, they really didn't quite know what to do with Tom.
Yeah. I like the idea of what they did, where they had him sort of hiding that there was something going on with him, but really it was an undercover thing he was doing with Janeway and Tuvok. And I did like that. But I'm not sure we executed it as well as we could have.
Yeah.
I guess is what I would say. And in a similar fashion, like we had a lot of good stuff with Harry in season 1, and he kind of disappeared here towards the end in season 2. And yeah, it's a little bit quiet. I have to say, I feel like season 2, by comparison to season 1, is a bit drab.
Yeah.
Even going back through the list of episodes and trying to pick out my top ones, right? It was sort of like, meh, there's a lot of okay in season 2. So I did the same thing and I compared the numbers. So while I gave 80% up in season 1, you gave 87% up. I only gave 65% up in season 2, and you only gave 69.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's quite a jump or a drop.
That is a
drop, I should say.
Yeah.
And again, comparing it to Deep Space Nine, this is where it sort of flips, where we rated Voyager overall higher than Deep Space Nine in season 1. In season 2, it's the opposite. So I gave 65% up for Voyager and 73% up for Deep Space Nine season 2 episodes. And you gave 69% up for Voyager and 81% for Deep Space Nine season 2. So it's just interesting to me how we really flipped.
I'm such a DS9 fanboy, I'll admit it.
But anyway, that is super interesting. And another thing people frequently ask me about is they'll say, your episodes you don't like are way shorter than the episodes that you do like. So, of course, I have the numbers. So I can tell you that for season 1 of Voyager, our average length is a 55-minute episode. Season 2, it's 56 minutes. So it's about the same.
Yeah.
And for episodes in season 1 that we both didn't like, there was only one. It was 55 minutes long. So it's the exact average. In season 2, it also is about the same. I think the down episode where we both gave down, it was about 57 minutes.
Yeah.
And then if you include neutral in there, it does dip down to 53. So there is some evidence that if we don't like an episode, that maybe we don't talk as long. But
it might be just noise in the sampling data.
Yeah. But overall, with Voyager, we've been pretty consistent with the length. Okay, I think those are all the categories that we have. Is there anything else you want to say about season 2?
Yes, I have something else.
Yep.
The Doctor as a holographic character and building the Doctor who's seeming to become self-aware is an interesting concept. I feel this is very much a parallel to Mr. Data and, ironically, almost makes Data obsolete. If holograms can become self-aware and be as effective as this Doctor is rapidly becoming, then the whole Data as an AI and having a positronic brain is pointless.
Yeah.
The Doctor has emotions, can learn empathy. Remember, Kess is teaching him that. You're heading down a path that if you could get the computing power for the holographic system and put it into a mobile android body, boom, how many Datas would you like?
Well, but is he really feeling it, or is he just sort of emulating it? Is the AI evolving to show it, but not really feel it?
Well, I think that was what was covered in projections. The Doctor was developing a psyche.
Because I guess he's able to feel pain. But again, it's just an AI making you think that he feels pain. I don't know.
Well, I think he's becoming as real as Data.
He's becoming self-aware. Skynet.
But a lot less murdery.
No, I think you're right. I think there are some challenges with comparing Data to the Doctor. Yeah. Data's still one of my all-time favorite characters.
Robert Picardo does a fantastic job at playing the Doctor.
The Doctor, he's just different, right? They use him for some comic relief. They use Data sometimes for comic relief in a different way. But I do think from an emotional storytelling point, dropping Data into the crew that has the empath and then the captain as well, who has difficulty with empathy and with sort of understanding the feelings of others and emotional intelligence and all that, and sort of dropping him in that, I think was great storytelling, which is why that character seems so strong because of what it's part of.
Well, I think Data was the replacement for a Vulcan.
Yeah, sure.
And he should appreciate the perfect logic he was given that Vulcans have spent their entire life trying to obtain.
Okay, anything else, I guess?
I would close my commentary on season 2. There was some shaky episodes, but it was still a series that kept our interest.
Yeah.
We watched it weekly, and I will contrast that with Enterprise, which you managed one season. I got through 2 and a bit.
I didn't get through a whole season.
Oh, wow.
I got to the shower scene and I was done. I never watched another episode.
Oh, I think it's an interesting comparison because Voyager, which, had some up and downs in this, it was good enough that we continued.
Yeah, and I'll put that down to a couple of things. One of them is just we like Star Trek, but I would also say Kate Mulgrew and Tim Russ are really watchable.
Yeah.
And so I would say that a lot of that was just the draw. It was these two people who are really good. The characters are good and the acting is so good. Okay, that wraps up our season wrap-up.
Yes, we have wrapped the wrap.
We wrapped the wrap. I think we will take a week or two off before we start season 3. And so I guess look for that in your feed shortly. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of season 2 or season 1 or any episode, you can email us at ReBingeIT@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us on Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, and YouTube at ReBingeIT. And of course, there's the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on the wrap-up of Rebinge Star Trek Voyager Season 2.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.